Ladies and gents, hello and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to show you guys how to downgrade an iPhone 4S from iOS 9 to iOS 6. This is a very straightforward process. I'm going to show you guys how to do every single step. All you need is an iPhone 4S that is activated and working. This does also work on the iPad 2nd gen. Keep in mind that the iPad 2, 4 does not work for this process. That was the model sold in 2012. But every other iPad 2nd gen and every iPhone 4S works the exact same for this process. Unfortunately, no other models are compatible, only the iPhone 4S and most iPad 2nd gens. Now, you're also going to need a Mac computer. It can pretty much be any model within the past 20 years. I believe you have to be running macOS El Capitan or later. I'm using a MacBook Air from 2020. This is the Intel model and it works just fine. Then the last thing you'll need is a USB to 30-pin cable to connect your device into the computer, and you might need a USB-C adapter if you have a newer Mac. All right, so starting off on the iPhone, the first step is going to be to get connected to the Wi-Fi, which I am. Then we're going to head over to Safari. This is going to be the jailbreak process. Now, in Safari, we're going to type in carbon.sep.lol. Just like that. And then we're going to click go, and we should head over to a website that's going to let us jailbreak. So here we are. We're going to click on install certs. Might have to do that a couple times. And we should be prompted inside of settings to install a profile. So we'll go ahead and do that. Once we're done installing, it should take us back to Safari. And now we're going to click on run. Now there's a good chance this is not going to work on the first time. You can see that my web page had to reload there. We're going to click on run again. Eventually, what's going to happen is the phone will become unresponsive and then it will restart and hopefully the jailbreak will be applied. So you can see that it is currently, well, it was thinking there for a second. We're going to keep pressing run until the iPhone restarts. Okay, well, while we wait for that, I'm going to show you guys these steps on the MacBook that we are going to need in order to get this process working. So we'll set the iPhone over there and give it a minute to figure out what it's going to do. So on the Mac, we're going to head to Safari. We're going to need a very useful piece of software called Legacy iOS Kit. So we're going to type in Legacy iOS Kit and click go. The first link should be a GitHub website, and that is where we're going to head. Over here on the right, you're going to click on where it says latest, and then we're going to click on the Legacy iOS Kit zip file. You're going to allow that download, and you can close out of Safari. Now there should be a folder in your downloads called Legacy iOS Kit. We're going to drag that onto the desktop because we're going to be referencing it quite a few times. Now we're going to open up Terminal, and we're going to be going back and forth between this folder and Terminal for a little while. So we're going to open up the folder. You should see a file called restore.sh. We're going to drag that into the Terminal window and then click on the Terminal window to make sure it's selected. You'll know it's selected because these buttons will have colors. Once that's the case, then you can click the return key. You may have to allow Terminal to access your desktop folder. And now we're prompted with an install from Xcode. We'll go ahead and proceed with that, agree to the terms and conditions, and continue on battery power. Now this process can take anywhere from a couple minutes to maybe up to a half hour, depending on your computer speed as well as the network speed. So while that works, we'll pick back up here on the iPhone and see what's going on. Seems like it has kind of stalled. We'll head back into Safari here and figure out what the deal is with this jailbreak. This thing can definitely be finicky, but it is a much better solution than what we previously had where you had to use your Apple ID to sideload an application and it was a mess. But this is, as long as it works, this is a lot easier. So we're just going to keep spamming that run button and hopefully we'll get a jailbreak eventually. Okay, the iPhone finally did something there. It was just spinning and spinning and spinning, and then eventually it gave us the low storage warning, and then the phone restarted. Now we should have City on the home screen, and we don't for whatever reason. I've actually encountered this before, and I forget exactly what it is you have to do. There's something, maybe you have to go back into Safari here. Okay, so all I had to do was open Safari a couple times, and eventually Cydia popped up on the home screen. So that's perfect. We can go ahead and open Cydia and wait for it to load. All right, there are a couple upgrades that are needed. I'm going to go ahead and ignore that, and hopefully that does not become a problem. Next step is heading over to the search bar, and we're going to type in OpenSSH, and it should be this green option here. And we're going to install that. And with that, we are finished on the iPhone. So we're going to go ahead and set that down and wait for the computer to finish installing this Xcode software. All right, the installation finally completed. So now we can move on to the next step, which is going to be to connect the iPhone into the computer and begin the downgrade process. So since I'm using a USB-C Mac, we're going to plug in the adapter, and then we're going to get the iPhone connected. If you're using an Apple Silicon computer, you will probably have to trust on the computer before you can connect to the iPhone, and then obviously you'll have to trust on the iPhone as well. So we'll set this right here, and then hopefully we can see what's going on as the process progresses. Okay, next up, we're going to go back on to the legacy iOS kit folder. We're going to take restore.sh and once again drag it onto the terminal window and then click return. Now it's telling us to run the script again, so we're going to drag restore.sh back into terminal and click return. And we're going to click the return key again to install the update. Now, if you've never used terminal and you've never used legacy iOS kit, this does look pretty intimidating because it's essentially just the program running without any sort of graphical interface. But it's actually not as bad as it looks. You don't have to do any of the coding. All you have to be able to do is use the arrow keys to select the right option. So the download finished. Once again, restore.sh back into terminal and click return. And now we finally have the options that we need for our iPhone. So I'll zoom in. Hopefully you guys can see this all right. So you can see that it's showing the hardware for our MacBook and the macOS version. Below that, we have iPhone 4S, which is iPhone 4,1. But down here's what we're interested in. These are all the options we have. And you can see that the restore/downgrade is selected right now, and that's what we want. But in order to navigate this menu, we're going to use the arrow keys to move up and down. So for us, we want the restore-downgrade option. So we're going to have that selected and then click the return key. Now we're going to toggle down to the iOS 6.1.3 option and click return again. And now we're going to go down to download target IPSW and click return again. And now the MacBook is going to download the 6.1.3 IPSW file from Apple's servers. And you can follow along with that download process right below here. Hopefully that won't take too long. Once again, it kind of depends on your internet speed. All right, once that's finished, we are pretty much ready to go. We're going to toggle down to the Start Restore option and click Return key. Now it's asking us if we want the phone to be jailbroken upon the restore, and I do, so we're going to click Yes. And if you have more than 8 GB of RAM, you'll click Yes here. If you don't, you'll click No. I've got 16, so I'm going to select the Yes option. And for this, we're going to click Return on KDFU mode. We have to enter in the root password, which for all of you guys is going to be Alpine, so ALPINE. As you type, it's not going to show up on the screen, so make sure you click the keys correctly and then click the return key. All right, now there's something you guys have to be aware of. There is a step here that's going to require us to unplug the iPhone and then plug it back in. And if you don't do that in a set amount of time, this process fails and you have to restore the iPhone. So we're going to make sure we don't miss that. You'll see it here on the screen, but you've got to pay attention for that to come up. Okay, the iPhone has turned off. Should be entering DFU mode.
Oh, hey guys, it's me from the future. So I'm currently editing this video and I paused it and I can see on the screen where it says unplug and replug your device now. That's what I'm talking about. At this point, you have to disconnect the cable from your iPhone and then plug it back in. You get 5 attempts, as you can see on the screen there. It says attempt 1 out of 5. Unplug and replug, and then it says attempt 2 out of 5. So it's going to give you 5 attempts to unplug and replug your device. So all you do is disconnect the iPhone and then plug it right back in. I don't know why this process was so strange for me. Usually you have to disconnect and plug it back in. I think there was some sort of glitch that mine didn't require me to do that, but I just wanted to let you guys know that that is probably going to pop up for you guys. So we'll go back to the video and see how this plays out.
Something else to consider, if you're using an Apple Silicon Mac, you might have several pop-ups throughout this process asking you to allow the iPhone to connect in DFU mode. So just make sure you're clicking allow on that. Eventually, if you let it sit long enough without clicking allow, the process will fail. So you don't want to let that happen. All right, this looks like it's going to take a while, so I'm going to speed through that process on the screen there. But you can see the iPhone is currently restoring to iOS 6, and we've got the progress bar on the phone as well as a little percentage here on the screen. So I'll go ahead and speed through this process, and you guys can watch a instant restore of iOS 6 as I speed this up. Okay, so the restore has completed, and we know that because you can see this little blue printout on the terminal window is telling us that restoring is done. Well, actually that part's green, but most of it's blue. And the iPhone is currently restarting, and we've got that old Apple logo. So this thing should finish up here in just a moment, and we should be met with the iOS 6 setup screen momentarily. All right, here we go. iOS 6 setup screen. We'll go ahead and slide to unlock, and this is some nostalgia right here, getting to see this old style Apple setup menu. I'll go ahead and fly through the setup here, and we should be met with the iOS 6 home screen here in just a few moments. And here we are. Look at that. iOS 6 on the iPhone 4S. Or if you're doing this on an iPad 2nd gen, your iPad 2nd gen. 6.1.3 to be exact. Okay, and you can see we've got Cydia on the home screen. That's because we selected the jailbreak option as we proceeded through the steps of downgrading. So opening Cydia here for the first time is going to take a few minutes. Now I'm continuing this process because I want to show you guys how to download applications and games because the built-in App Store does not work. If you're happy with just the jailbreak, then you are finished at this step. But if you want to hang around and see how to install applications and games using an alternate App Store, then this is the part of the video for you. All right, we're back in Cydia, and let's see what sources we have installed. This one has got some good stuff. There's nothing right now. I think we're gonna have to refresh and maybe even restart the iPhone a couple times to get this Cydia up and running with the correct stuff. So I'm gonna click refresh there, and we'll see what happens once it loads. All right, so AppSync is one of the files we need, and the other is called Vitiris. And to get that, we're gonna have to add another source. So we're gonna type in yzu.moe, and I think -dev is the correct one if I'm remembering. It looks like it was. So yzu.mo-dev. I'll type that up on the screen right there for you guys to get a quick look at. Once you've done that and Cydia has loaded, we're going to go back, and then we're going to click on this one here. It's called Electamon's repo. It's got the little Apple Store icon, and we'll click on all packages. Scroll down to the bottom and you should see Vitiris. We're going to install that. All right, and that should be everything. You should now see the Vitiris icon on the home screen, and if we open that, this is what it looks like. There's a home tab with not a whole lot to do there, just some announcements depending on updates. We've got a settings tab, which I actually haven't seen before. Looks like you probably shouldn't mess around in there unless you want to change the theme. We've got a featured tab, which just, I think, displays random applications. And we've got categories, and the search tool is what I use, so you can search for some old games. So let's go with Flappy Bird, and we'll download that. How about some Minecraft? We'll see if we can find that one. We'll go ahead and download that. And what about Angry Birds? That's a classic. Let's see which one we get. Star Wars. What about just the original? There we go. We'll download that. So inside of this app, if you click on More and then click on Queue, you can see the status of your applications as they are downloading. Then if they've been installed or if they've failed, they'll go down to the bottom there under the Failed tab. And it looks like those are about done. So you can see we got Flappy Bird and Minecraft on the home screen. Angry Bird should pop up there in just a moment. Let's open up Flappy Bird and give it a try here. When this game came out, I think it was 2012 maybe, everyone I knew was playing this on their device. There was just something so addictive about it. Such a simple game, and it was incredibly challenging at first. If you've never played it, try it out. I think you're going to find that it's really difficult, at least in the beginning. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually quite easy, but it's a fun game, and it runs really well here on the iPhone 4S. I don't know the full story, but the developer ended up taking it off of the App Store. I think maybe because it was so popular and people were wanting to put ads on it to make money, and I don't know. It was an interesting situation, and I'm not sure what ended up happening with it, but I'm actually doing pretty well here. We'll see how far I can make it. I don't know what my high score was. I feel like it was maybe in the okay, I was gonna say maybe in the 60s at one point, and we just scored 33 there. So pretty fun little game there. And we got Minecraft, and obviously most of you guys probably know Minecraft. So there you guys have it. That has been a downgrade tutorial here for the iPhone 4S or the iPad 2nd gen if you've got one of those. Hopefully the steps stay the same for quite some time, and hopefully that jailbreak website works. If you guys run into any troubles along the way, leave me a comment down below, and hopefully either myself or someone else will be able to answer your question. Hopefully you found this guide to be pretty straightforward, and I'm hoping that I can help out a few people get their device downgraded and then install some old apps and games. That is going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.